Good evening, everybody. This Sunday psalm is the second half of Psalm 66. So let's take a look at the whole psalm, and so we can get some idea of how it speaks to us in our current situation. Shout to God, all the earth. Sing the glory of God's name. Make God's praise glorious. Say to God, how awesome are your deeds. Because of the greatness of your strength, your enemies bow before you. All the earth worships you. Let them sing to you. Let them sing about your name. So we see at the beginning of this psalm, the psalmist is full of praise, is glorifying God because of what God has done for the people. And it's not limited to the worshipers that might be gathered in the temple. This is all the earth. All the earth worships you, and let all the earth sing about your power and your name. This is the one God who does wondrous things over all the earth. And the psalmist is full of praise for this God. Come and see God's works. Awesome is what God does for human beings. He turned the sea into dry land. Through the river they passed on foot. There we rejoiced in him, the one who rules by his power forever. So now the general sense of how wonderful and how praiseworthy God is narrowed down to one particular act, and that is the crossing of the Red Sea at the time of the Exodus. The people come through this, the sea parts before them, the people come through the sea, and Pharaoh and his chariots behind them are destroyed. The same when they come to the Jordan River, when they're about to cross over into the promised land, the same thing happens. The river parts before them and they can cross dry shod. So now it's not just the praise of what God has done, for what God has done for the whole world. It's praise for what God has done for us. His eyes watch over the nations. Let not the rebellious rise against him. O peoples, bless our God and make the sound of his praise heard, the one who preserves us in life and does not let our feet slip. The invitation to praise is extended to all the nations because God watches over them all. It's not just Israel that is in at the heart of this psalm. It's all peoples, all nations who should be blessing God and thanking God and praising God all together because of the one God who is whose mighty acts embrace all the whole world. The one who preserves us in life and does not let our feet slip. I think that's important for us to think about on a daily basis. It's a good meditation every day. The one who preserves us in life. God is the one who preserves us in life every moment, every breath, does not let our feet slip. But you have tested us, O God. You have refined us like the refining of silver. You have brought us into a difficult place. You have put a chain around our waist. You have let people ride over our heads. We have been through fire and water, but you have brought us out to a safe place. Something happened. We're not sure what. Maybe a defeat in battle, maybe an oppressor who is an oppressive ruler. You have brought us into a difficult place. You're testing us, oh God. Oftentimes, the people who first wrote and sang the Psalms thought of when difficult things happened that they were somehow they were tests sent from God. And in some ways, I think we can still usefully think in those terms today, but we have to be careful. Not every God doesn't send us bad things in order to test us, but the experience we have of difficult times, hard circumstances, uh, painful, even tragic events in our lives, uh, are the way we experience it, the way we experience them can have the effect of refinement, especially refining our understanding of who we are and who God is. I don't think God sends us those things for that purpose, uh, but they can be, they can in fact have that effect. And that's some of the good that may come out of a very difficult time. In this case, the stanza concludes, "We have been through fire and water, but you have brought us out to a safe place." The end of it is that no matter how difficult the situation that we're dealing with, God's desire is always to bring us to a safe place. I will come into your temple with sacrifices. I will pay my vows to you, which my lips made and my mouth spoke when I was in trouble. Sacrifices of the fattest I will offer to you. With the sweet smell of roasting rams, I will prepare cattle and goats. Now that doesn't sound like our kind of worship, but it is temple worship based on the sacrifice of animals. That's what Old Testament temple worship was. Uh, and it was done with a sincere heart. The sense was that with Thanksgiving, you would bring what was most precious to you to the temple and offer it to God. And for those folks, uh, what was most precious to them was their livestock. They didn't slaughter their livestock on a regular basis for food. It was too valuable for that. Sheep and goats were too valuable for that. Uh, but occasionally, as because of an overflowing heart that wanted to worship God, they would bring a sheep or a lamb or a goat to the temple to be sacrificed. This is their act of worship, an act of gratitude because of God bringing them now into a safe place. Come, listen to all who fear God, what God has done for me. I called out to him with my mouth. I praised him with my tongue. That's actually a bit of a mistranslation. It should be, come, listen, all who fear God, what God has done for me. Um, I called out to him with my mouth. I praised him with my tongue. When God acts in our lives, we may realize that. We may recognize it. We may even sometimes mention it in casual conversation. We don't. We will sometimes say after a close call, we might say that was a miracle, or thank God that it wasn't this way, but it was that way. So we do acknowledge God's presence in our lives and speak that to other people. Um, but my sense is that we don't do it enough, and that we don't do it seriously enough. It's important that we give witness to what God does in our lives. Uh, I, I think for different people that witness takes different forms. Um, I myself am not someone who particularly likes to hear someone talking about God, God, God all the time, or using kind of pious phrases all the time. But we should be ready to let people know what God is doing in our lives. And this stanza shows the psalmist doing just that. Come, listen, all who fear God. Listen to what God has done for me. Here's a thought. If I had been thinking about evil in my heart, the Lord would not have heard me. But God did hear. He paid attention to the sound of my prayer. Blessed be God, because he did not turn aside my prayer or his kindness from me. If I had been thinking about evil in my heart, is this the psalmist saying, well, if I had been, if I had been such a great person like I am, God would never have heard my prayer? That's a dangerous thought. The thinking goes, God's not going to hear me because I'm not worthy. That's kind of the inverse or the obverse of this. God won't hear me because I'm not worthy. God doesn't care about me. Sometimes you hear it, this put, God's too busy to listen to me. And that goes against the entire biblical witness. When it says, if I had been thinking about evil in my heart, I like to read it as, if I had been thinking evil while I was praying, if I had been intending evil by my prayer, the Lord would not have heard me. I think those are the only prayers that God doesn't hear. The prayers in which we somehow imply or explicitly wish evil on someone else, or the answer to the prayer would cause evil to someone else. But the psalmist knows God did hear. God paid attention to the sound of my prayer, and then is again full of thanksgiving and blessing. Blessed be God, because he did not turn aside my prayer or his kindness from me. God's kindness is based on God's covenant with us, God's promises to us. And God's kindness is part of God's character. This is who God is. God does not forget God's promises. And that's the basis for this whole psalm, which has looked back at the events of both good and bad, the events both good and bad that have happened, and brought them all into a faith and a certainty about the kindness of God. So maybe now in a time of COVID, when we're all wondering where God is in all of this, we need to remember that God does hear our prayers, that God is always kind, and that God is present even in the most difficult circumstances. That's our meditation on Psalm 66 for this week. It's the Psalm for Sunday for this week. I wish you a good night. I wish you that you may be safe and sane and healthy. And I hope that that meditating on the Psalms will always lift your heart to God. Now, if you'd like, you can continue listening, and you'll hear the psalm tone for Psalm 66 from the Genevan Psalter of 1564.